Recently, a surprising incident left me quite shaken. My mother-in-law, in an unforeseen and unsettling act, took my passport and deliberately burned it. The passport quickly caught fire, reducing it to ashes in mere moments. This act abruptly halted my plans for a vacation to St. Bees Island, leaving me in utter disbelief. As I confronted her, asking for an explanation, she simply smirked and coldly informed me that since I was a stranger in her eyes, I would not be traveling anywhere but staying home. Beside her, my husband only offered a grin, complicit in the deceit. Their cruel maneuver was shocking, though not entirely unexpected. However, their level of sneakiness was something I had not anticipated. They seemed to take pleasure in their scheme, sharing a laugh over their perceived triumph. At that moment, frustrated and needing to assert my identity, I reminded them of who I am. My name is Kayla, I'm 30 years old, and I'm a linguist. I study and teach languages at the university, a role that often takes me abroad for extended periods as I engage with different cultures and share my knowledge through my organization. This job requires me to travel frequently, often leaving me away from home for months. Before this job, I never envisioned marriage in my future. However, everything changed when I returned to my home country at 25 and met Peter, who would later become my husband. Despite the challenges posed by my career, which demands that I spend about half the year overseas, Peter and I maintained our relationship through constant communication via phone calls and emails. We got married when I was 27, and he has been incredibly supportive, even though our marriage involves long periods of separation. Today, as I make my way home from the airport, it's been 6 months since I last saw my husband. Despite the long flight and the draining events that unfolded with my passport, I'm filled with excitement rather than fatigue. I'm eager to reunite with Peter, stepping quickly towards what I hope will be a joyful reunion and perhaps a resolution to the recent turmoil caused by his family. After a long absence, I arrived home to find Peter not yet back, so I began to tidy up a bit. Although I always remind him to keep our place neat, I usually find it somewhat disarrayed. Normally, this would bother me, but today I decided to let it slide because I was simply too excited to see him again. As I busied myself in the kitchen, I heard the front door open. It was Peter. Overjoyed, I rushed to greet him with a warm, "Welcome home, Peter. It's so good to see you." His response was lukewarm. "Oh, hi, Kayla. You're back. Is that all? After 6 months apart?" I couldn't hide my disappointment. "We haven't seen each other in 6 months, Peter. Aren't you going to say you missed me?" He shrugged. "We've been doing this for a while, so I guess I'm used to it. I'm just really tired. Is dinner ready?" "Yes, it's ready. Let's eat." Dinner felt special, as eating with Peter after so many months apart usually would, but today was tinged with a bit of sadness. His attention seemed divided, constantly glancing at his phone. I couldn't help but express my frustration. "Hey, Peter, why do you keep staring at your phone?" He was dismissive. "There's nothing wrong, but you've been gone and we've stayed connected through calls and emails, right? There's nothing new to discuss." That hurt. "That might be true, Peter, but it's been a long time since we've been together. Shouldn't that count for something?" My tone sharpened with my growing frustration, which seemed to upset him. He stood up abruptly, placed his phone on the table, and glared at me. "You know what? You just came off a plane, but I'm exhausted from work. Just got it?" Stung, I retorted, "Hold on. I also came straight here after work. Don't talk to me like that." "I didn't ask you to rush. You chose to come home immediately," he replied coldly. His words stung, but I needed to make my feelings clear. "You don't have to say it like that. Despite everything, I missed you." At that moment, both of us paused, the weight of our words hanging between us. After months apart, I came home only to find the atmosphere chillingly tense. Peter's reception was colder than expected. As we sat down for dinner, he blurted out, "I'm just saying, I didn't ask you to rush home. If you're going to act like this, maybe you shouldn't come back at all. You're being annoying, Kayla." Frustrated, he slammed the table and stormed out of the room, leaving his dinner untouched. Alone and confused, I wondered to myself, why is he acting so cold? I had been eagerly anticipating our reunion, but it seemed I was the only one excited. What was the point of coming home early if it was only going to end in disappointment? Tears spilled onto the table as I sat there, the joy of our reunion overshadowed by a sinking feeling of dread. The next morning, the tension hadn't lifted. When I greeted him with a good morning, he gave me a frosty look and said bitterly, "I envy you. You get to relax at home all the time while I'm stuck working." That wasn't true, and I corrected him. "That's not accurate, Peter. I have a lot of work too. Summarizing our activities, preparing for the next training session. It's more work than you think." He dismissed my efforts. "Sure, but you can do it from home. I wish I had a job where I could take half the year off. You enjoy your time at home, princess." Stunned by his sarcastic tone, I watched as he left the house without another word. We had our share of arguments before, but he had never been this cutting. His sarcastic demeanor left me puzzled and worried about the growing rift between us. While I pondered over what might help mend our relationship, I busied myself with household chores, vacuuming, and changing the linens. Amidst this, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. With a sense of unease, I answered, "Hello, Kayla here." "Hi, Kayla. It's been a while. I heard you're back home and had a rough day yesterday." "Yes, that's right. And I also heard you upset Peter. He was quite angry." The call added to my confusion and worry, leaving me to question how I could bridge the gap that had formed between us since my return. During the phone call, my mother-in-law's suggestion caught me off guard. "Now that you're back, how about we plan a family trip?" she proposed. Before I could even process the idea, she continued, "I was talking with my husband about going to St. Bert's Island, and Peter mentioned he wanted to join us. You're used to traveling abroad, right? Could you help us with hotel reservations and other arrangements?" Her request was loaded. From her tone, it was clear she didn't actually relish the thought of traveling with me, but saw an opportunity to leverage my travel experience. My relationship with my mother-in-law had always been strained. She had never hidden her disdain for me. Ever since we first met at the wedding reception, her attitude had been consistently sarcastic. Even after 3 years of marriage, her views hadn't softened. When I was working abroad, she often sent me messages that stung. "How can you be a wife and stay away from home for months? If you don't take care of the house, I'd rather my son marry someone else. It was a mistake to let him marry you." These memories made me apprehensive about her proposal. It felt like I was being used to facilitate their travel plans, a task that seemed more appealing than enduring her usual critiques. I was frustrated with myself for my inability to decline, even though I recognized that I was being manipulated. A few hours later, Peter returned from work in a noticeably better mood than he had been earlier. He dropped his briefcase on the sofa, flashed a wide smile, and said, "Mom called, didn't she? We can go on a trip to St. B's." "Yeah, I heard," I replied cautiously. "But you're not thinking of turning it down, are you? Mom wants you to come with us," he pressed. His enthusiasm made it even harder to express my reservations. I understood his desire for me to be involved, but the dynamics made me uneasy. How could I navigate this situation without escalating tensions or feeling even more used? As the conversation about the family trip continued, I cautiously suggested, "Why don't you just go with your mom and dad as you originally planned?" The moment those words left my lips, Peter's attitude shifted dramatically. He clicked his tongue, and his voice took on a more threatening tone. "You need to understand your role here. The only time you're useful to us is when we're traveling." His words stung. "You don't have to speak like that," I protested. "It's true, isn't it?" he retorted, undeterred. "Anyway, you'll handle all the flight and hotel bookings, and everything should be in my name, as you probably know." "But Peter, you're going to pay for the whole trip?" I asked, trying to clarify our financial arrangement. "What are you talking about? We'll split the cost 50-50ths. It's a small price to pay to show respect to our parents," he argued, implying that my objection was disrespectful. "And what is that supposed to mean? If you've got time to lounge around at home, make the reservations now," he demanded. "This isn't right. I don't want to. I mumbled, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you mumbling about?" he scoffed, grabbing a beer from the fridge and downing it in one gulp. Despite my inner turmoil and the unfairness of the situation, I felt cornered. Embarrassed and without a real choice, I proceeded to make all the arrangements for the flights and accommodations for the trip to St. Bert's Island, just as Peter and his mother had insisted. On the day of the trip, I was set to pick them up at my in-laws' house and head straight to the airport. But a few days before our departure, I found myself restless and unable to sleep. Late at night, I realized Peter wasn't beside me. I walked to the living room and overheard him on the phone. "It's okay, Mom. I'll be there first thing in the morning as planned. Please handle the passport issue anyway. Seriously, I'm looking forward to it. I'll make sure to introduce her to you," he said into the receiver. Hearing this, I was filled with a mix of emotions. What was supposed to be a family trip was turning into a series of commands and manipulations, and now there were secrets too. I stood there, unsure of how to confront this new revelation. When I returned home, Peter's conversation still echoed in my mind. He had mentioned a passport and introduced someone, and since he was speaking to his mother, I was sure it was my mother-in-law on the other end. There seemed to be hidden plans that I wasn't privy to, which made me uneasy about the upcoming trip. It was clear that something was being orchestrated behind my back, but I couldn't grasp the full extent of it. Resolved to remain vigilant, I prepared for our departure with caution. The day of our trip to St. Bert's Island finally arrived. I methodically packed both my carry-on and handbag, including items for my husband, ensuring we were ready for the journey. With everything set, Peter and I drove to my in-laws' house. As we approached, I braced myself, unsure of what awaited us, but ready to face whatever might come. Upon our arrival, it was only my mother-in-law who greeted us. "Oh, hi, Kayla. It's been a while. Good to see you. We're almost ready. I just need to grab a few things for the trip, so it might be a little while," she said, her tone casual but with a sense of urgency that raised my suspicions further. "Okay, take your time," I replied. Then she added, "Oh, and Kayla, could you bring the carry-on case from the other room? It's heavy, so please get Peter to help you." "Sure, I'll do that," I agreed, keenly observing the exchange of knowing glances between my husband and mother-in-law. I kept my passport securely in my pocket, an instinctual move born from the mistrust that had been building. As I followed my husband's directions and returned to the living room with the carry-on, I found my mother-in-law waiting with a mischievous grin. To my horror, she was holding my passport in her hands. "Now you can't go on the trip to St. Bert's," she declared with a smirk. "What do you mean? I'm going to burn this passport right now," she threatened. "What did you just say?" I reacted in disbelief, the gravity of her words sinking in. "I was just using you to handle the trip arrangements," she admitted callously. "You're a stranger here, so you'll be staying behind. Too bad." Her words struck me like a cold slap. The situation was far worse than I had imagined, and the betrayal cut deep. I realized I was not just an outsider in their plans, but a mere pawn in whatever game they were playing. The revelation left me reeling, unsure of how to respond to such blatant manipulation and deceit. In a sudden and shocking move, my mother-in-law stormed into the kitchen, lit a lighter, and set a passport ablaze in the sink. The document quickly caught fire, turning into black ashes before our eyes. As it was completely destroyed, she triumphantly declared, "We did it!" My husband joined in with a cheer. "Yeah, Mom, we made it." "No," I interjected. "It's just the three of us on this trip, right? We'll get to meet Peter's new girlfriend when we get back." "Yeah, I've already set that up," my mother-in-law replied nonchalantly. "We don't need this useless woman anymore," my father-in-law chimed in coldly. He then pulled out his cell phone and showed me pictures of himself with another woman, looking pleased with himself. "I'm not divorcing you for the sake of my reputation, but you'll be staying here while we go on our trip. When we get back, I'll move in with her and you can leave." My mother-in-law laughed mockingly at his words. Their expressions were full of malice. At that moment, I realized I no longer belonged in a family like this. I forced a smile and asked, "By the way, whose passport is that?" "What are you talking about? It's yours, of course. I took it out of your handbag," she said confidently. "My passport is right here," I said, holding up my actual passport from my pocket. "What? Why? It can't be," she stammered, her confidence faltering. I showed her my passport still intact. "Yes, it's my passport. See for yourself." The realization dawned on her face, pale with panic. "That's not possible," she muttered, her voice trembling. It seemed my mother-in-law had mistakenly thought she had taken my passport from my handbag. Her plans, driven by malice, had not involved checking the passport thoroughly before burning it. "Whose passport did I burn then?" she asked, her voice quivering with a mix of fear and confusion. "I guess it was your son's passport that was in there," I suggested. "You burned my son's passport?" she asked, horrified. My mother-in-law turned white as the gravity of her mistake hit her. The family dynamics, already strained, were now irrevocably shaken by her rash actions and the underlying schemes that had come to light. The moment my mother-in-law realized the passport she burned was her son's, chaos erupted. My husband, furious, lashed out at her. "What have you done? I told you to be careful. I only found one passport in her handbag. Who would have thought it belonged to me?" "I don't care. You didn't check properly, and now look what happened," he shouted. "You're saying it's my fault? If you had checked from the start, I wouldn't have made this mistake," she retorted, her voice rising in defense. Their argument escalated quickly, and they began blaming each other. Amidst the tumult, my husband turned to me. "Hey, Kayla, do something," but I was not about to be dragged further into their mess. "Seriously, who do you think you are telling me what to do? You cheated on me behind my back. How dare you both? You and your mother are despicable," I fired back. "Hey, who do you think you're talking to?" my husband snapped. "I'm talking to you and your awful mother. Don't think I'm just going to let this slide. You're going to pay me back for the affair and all the nasty things your mother has said to me. Be ready," I declared, my resolve hardening. Just then, my father-in-law appeared, drawn by the noise. "What's going on here? What are you doing?" he demanded. After I explained everything, he was livid. The planned trip was immediately canceled, and the fallout was severe. My mother-in-law faced a divorce, and my husband was disowned by his father and banned from returning home. I consulted a lawyer and proceeded with the divorce. I also demanded alimony from both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law, which they had to pay in one lump sum, along with covering the costs of the canceled trip to St. Nevis Island. Financially unprepared, they had to borrow money to meet these demands. In the end, my ex-husband, now living with his mother, found himself in a tough financial situation. He was also left by the woman he had an affair with. Meanwhile, I used the alimony money to move into a condo and start anew, embracing a life of independence. Free from cheating and mistreatment, I faced many challenges but emerged stronger. Now, I'm loving life, planning to continue my travels, learning about different cultures, and sharing my experiences with the world.